Federal Drive is presented by GEHA, Government Employees Health Association, proudly providing health and dental benefits to federal employees and their families. Visit GEHA.com.
And now, the Federal Drive with Terry Gerton, sponsored by GEHA.
Welcome to the Federal Drive on Federal News Network. It's Thursday, June 18th. I'm your host, Terry Gerton, and I'm glad you're here. Coming up on this hour of the Federal Drive, it's one thing to expand missile production capacity. It's another to rebuild stockpiles fast enough to meet actual demand. Plus, for DHS contractors, the funding may be back, but turning that into actual work and payment is another story. Those stories and much more ahead during this hour of the Federal Drive. We begin with this. The Small Business Administration is expanding its scrutiny of socio-economic contracting programs to now include a review of the women-owned small business program. SBA is giving these firms until late June or early July to respond to a survey and provide the agency with personal and business tax returns for the last 3 years. For more about this new audit and an update on SBA's continued scrutiny of the 8A program, Federal News Network's executive editor Jason Miller joins me now. Jason, great to have you.
Thanks, Terry.
This feels like a new chapter in a story we've been reading for the last 18 months or so. What is SBA asking of women-owned small businesses now?
Specifically, SBA is looking at what they call economically disadvantaged women-owned small businesses. Now, there's a specific program across government for women-owned small businesses, but they're kind of going underneath that to say, okay, those who specifically identify as economically disadvantaged, a lot of those are minority-owned businesses, and a lot of those are women-owned businesses in specific sectors. For instance, a common one that we've seen over the last 25 years or so is construction. There's fewer women who are in the construction business, so they potentially could be considered economically disadvantaged because so many men run construction companies. So what they're doing is SBA is saying, we're going to put this new audit together, and we want to verify that these firms continue to meet the letter of the law, which means that a woman or women, multiple women, own at least 51% of the firm, and those that own that are still considered economically disadvantaged. Now, we have the links to the statute regulations, 13 CFR 127.203, in case you're keeping score at home, Terry. But basically what they're doing is they're really taking a deep dive. And Terry, this is very, very similar to what they did with the 8A program. Maybe not as deep of a dive, but if you remember back in last December, they asked 4,300 8A firms for 13 different types of data, ranging from the company's employees to bank statements to 3 years of fiscal years of 8A contracts as part of this ongoing audit. And from that, SBA ended up suspending more than 1,100 firms and eventually terminating 154 8A companies. So I think this is very similar to the path that they're going down.
So in some ways, it seems like they're scrubbing the books. Is that what they're trying to accomplish with this audit, or is there a bigger objective?
I think that's a good way to put it, to say is, hey, do you still meet the requirements or not? Now, I've talked to some folks in the women-owned small business firms, some specifically economically disadvantaged firms, and they say, listen, we have to go through this every 3 years anyways. We are already providing our information to the SBA as part of the required scrutiny. One executive who requested anonymity told me they had actually just renewed their certification, and SBA checked all the boxes and said, hey, you're good to go for 3 more years. So there's a fear now that, well, why are you re-looking at me if you've already approved me? And again, a lot of these economically disadvantaged women-owned businesses go through this audit every few years. So it's a rolling audit. So again, it could be that, SBA only sent this out to a third or a quarter or some sort of percentage of the firms. Unfortunately, SBA did not respond to several requests for comments to give it more kind of transparency on what they're trying to get done here. But the email that I received, it was very specific to what they were looking at. And I think it's worth highlighting that they're looking to determine if the firm continues to meet program eligibility requirements, and or they're trying to kind of hold these firms accountable to say, hey, if you don't, we will remove you from or suspend you from the program until you prove otherwise. So again, very similar playbook to the 8A program.
Do they have any data that tell them how big a problem this might be? Are they just concerned that firms have grown out of the 8A designation?
So it's hard to say if there's any evidence of how many firms are quote unquote fronts, right? There's a big, over the years, you've seen this time and again for all the socioeconomic classes. Hey, are you just a figurehead and somebody behind the scenes is pulling the strings? Someone who is not economically disadvantaged or minority owned business. And that has always been a concern. And that's why you've seen over the last 5, 6, 7 years, more scrutiny on these programs across the board, whether it's through Congress and congressional statute changes or SBA and FAR regulations. They've asked for more scrutiny. We've seen women-owned business, small business firms grow year after year after year. The most recent data from 2023 shows about 1,410 firms entered the market, the federal market, that are women-owned small businesses. That's up from 1,183 the year before and 1,276 the year before that. Now, GSA, which runs the supplier dashboard, has not updated that since 2023. So we don't know what things look like in 2024, 2025, and so on and so forth. We do have some other data that we can point to that says, hey, the growth of this market has been pretty dramatic. We have some interesting data from our friends at Leadership Connect. And what they showed us, Terry, was in 2024, these firms, economically disadvantaged women-owned small business firms, won about $8.7 million in contracts. Now, that dropped in 2025 during the Trump administration to $4.7 million, and it's continued to drop in 2026. We've seen them about $2.3 million. Again, this is all within about the 6 or 9 months within the same period, to compare apples to apples. Across the board, when you just look across the entire government for all women-owned small business firms, the data is even more interesting. From 2020 to 2024, again, the most recent data we have, agencies awarded up from $27.1 billion in 2020 to $31.7 billion in 2024. So roughly a $4 billion increase. So more money is going to these firms, which I would expect why SBA maybe is worried. Okay, are you really meeting the eligibility requirements? We're talking about billions and billions of dollars. And I think that's probably part of the reason why they are starting to look more deeply at these firms.
When you take all of that focus on now the women-owned small business and put it together with other sorts of things that they're doing, what new changes are folks in this sector looking at?
I think there's a lot of concern about what the small business environment is looking like. Now, one of the things we saw, SBA is continuing to turn up the scrutiny on the 8A program. Most recently, SBA released a proposed rule that would basically change the basis for entry into the program. SBA says individuals will no longer be considered quote unquote socially disadvantaged and therefore automatically eligible for the 8A program simply because they belong to a specific racial minority group. Likewise, they say no individual may be barred from the program simply because they are not part of a minority or racial group, so if they're white. So I think they're really trying to take home the fact that you need to submit evidence of your social disadvantage status, verifiable fact-based evidence. Now, a lot of folks will say, okay, that's great, except for that already happened as part of a Supreme Court decision called Ultima several years ago. And the changes to SBA regulations have already happened to require this. So what is SBA really trying to do here? What changes are they trying to make? And I think this is just, again, part of the messaging that SBA is sending to a certain extent that says, hey, the way we've done small business contracting in the past as a government is not going forward. We're making changes. We expect small business contracting to be open to more people, no matter the sex you are or the color of your skin. And I think that's the message they're sending. Interestingly enough, Terry, the one thing I think that we also have to pay attention to is Congress is starting to pay attention to what SBA is doing, both positively and negatively. The Senate Small Business Committee, Ed Markley, the ranking member, came out very much against this change, both to the economically disadvantaged women-owned business program as well as the changes to the 8A program. And at the same time, we've seen Senator Mike Lee and Congressman Glenn Grothman introduce the Ending Discrimination in Government Contracting Act back in April that would eliminate contracting preferences for businesses owned by social and economically disadvantaged individuals, including women. So they were taking aim specifically at the 8A program as well as the women-owned small business programs. Sounds
like there's going to be a lot for folks in this space to watch.
Absolutely. I mean, the data we reported on just last week from Senator Markley showed just the impact that a lot of these changes are happening at the agency level on small businesses. There's a lot of concern in the marketplace about, okay, I depend on the government for a lot of my business, maybe I still need to kind of look outside the government. Maybe the government's not such a good customer anymore for small businesses. And there's a lot of concern in the market around the mixed messages that's coming from the administration, where they want to support small businesses. They want to promote manufacturing. You've seen SBA with the 250th anniversary of the nation really promoting a lot of new offers, new services to small businesses, lending programs, AI accelerators. Yet here they are within the government itself, really taking a lot of big hits to the small business program that has been a lifeline for many, many companies over the last 30, 40, 50 years.
That's Federal News Network's executive editor, Jason Miller. Jason, thanks for joining me.
Always a pleasure, Terry.
You can find his full story at federalnewsnetwork.com. Up next, it's one thing to expand missile production capacity. It's another to rebuild stockpiles fast enough to meet actual demand. This is the Federal Drive with Terry Gerton on Federal News Network.